Okay, well, I just want to get a couple of quick ones in here from George. He goes, best darn 15. The phone lines are lit. Bleeping brilliant. All right, let's go to Angel here. He says the 2023 Texans reminds me of the 1992 Chargers. Everyone expected them to finish last, but they got the last laugh by winning the division.
What a job. What a job done by D'Amico Ryans. We had talked about this way back in the summer when we were first starting our podcast, that they went into the marketplace, and yes, they hit the jackpot with C.J. Stroud, but they had no players. And they went in, I think they signed 24 free agents, street free agents. And then they went in and I think they added like 21 more undrafted college free agents. And they hit on virtually everybody they brought in. And they picked up refugees from everywhere. And those guys have plugged into the system. They got a stroke of good luck. Have had no catastrophic injuries at all this season. There's about 3 teams in a league that can say that. But C.J. Stroud has just made phenomenal gains as a thrower. So they're going to be fun to watch in postseason. And we do our show on Thursday. We're gonna do the wild card weekend preview. But that's a great quarterback, and what a job D'Amico Ryans has done. You know, they normally vote Coach of the Year. John, you went 14-2, Coach of the Year.
Right.
Hey, D'Amico went 10-7. He gets my vote as Coach of the Year because he did more with less. Look what he accomplished. And by the way, he's playing next weekend.
Yeah, well, for sure. You know, my son just moved to Houston, and he's kind of switched his team, his allegiance to the Texans, and he figured it was going to be a long haul before they were good, and now they're good again. But I want to go back to Angel's comment here. What are your memories of the 1992 Chargers?
Well, nobody expected anything. Bobby Ross started out of the gate, might have been 0-4.
I think that's what it was.
And
yeah.
People were barking. You hired this guy? And they were barking at Bobby Bethler like, you hired this guy? Well, I knew Bobby Ross's background and what he'd done in Kansas City as an NFL assistant coach, and obviously what he did at an impossible place to win, Georgia. He won a national championship at Georgia Tech. Not Georgia Tech.
Wow.
So I knew the track record, but it takes time. It takes time. They had to get a quarterback. They got Stan Humphries, but it took time to get him into the system, and they were piecemealing players together. But the foundation that was laid in 92 became what they were in 94 that put them in the Super Bowl in January of 1995. It takes time to build things.
Well, I'm going to make sure I have my facts straight, but I remember they were around 0-4 in 92. And on your show on 690, you said they're going to win out the rest of the season. Run the table. And I was like, no way are they going to run the table.
So you're the one that thought I was a dumbass.
And I think they only lost one game the rest of the way till the playoffs. So, and that's when I remember I went to that playoff game against Kansas City, and I remember the Chargers, it was in Qualcomm, and the Chargers, I think, lost. It was in the rain. Wasn't it in the rain? And I remember after that's when I got season tickets up through to the late 90s. But yeah, 92 is when we had hope finally for the Chargers.
Well, there was a foundation there, but it takes time. That's what makes what D'Amico Ryans has just done absolutely amazing.
Yeah, year one, and you're in the playoffs. Good for him. Hey, let's go to John here. He says, there's also rumors about Belichick and Harbaugh going to D.C. and Atlanta. I'm waiting for the rumors about either going to Nashville to begin.
I don't know how stable the Nashville organization is. There's been a lot of turmoil there, and Vrabel lost a power play with the general manager, Ron Carthon. I was so stunned on Tuesday morning when I found out that Vrabel had been dispatched out of there. But everybody's going to make a run at Harbaugh. He'll have his choice. Belichick, Washington makes sense to me. Belichick, Atlanta, Arthur Blank has great respect for him. I guess that kind of makes sense to me. I don't know Belichick to Carolina makes any sense at all just because David Tepper's a crazy man. And Belichick to the Chargers, only if Harbaugh elects to go somewhere else. You know, and Belichick and the Raiders, that's a rumor out there too, just based on his track record.
Well, do you think Belichick, if he came into any organization, would he be the tough guy, kind of, setting them straight, or would he be like the young players that say, oh yeah, you're from another era, and not really take him seriously? What do you think?
Oh, I think got the rings. System works. His defense played really well this year with a lot of young guys, and they had a bunch of injuries. Their problem was they had no quarterback. Offense was anemic. So, I think Belichick's resume impresses everybody. So I'll be fascinated to see if he stays and ends in New England and how it's carried out, if this is indeed the final year, or whether, and he's already said, I'm willing to give up player personnel. So you bring a new general manager in who's going to secure the players. I'm doing my job. This is the quarterback I'm drafting at number 3. And this is what I'm doing in free agency. Here's your roster, Bill. Coach it. It'll be a very different world in New England going forward, but he's already said he's willing to give up the player personnel part of the equation.
You know, what's interesting is usually you see players at the very end of their career go to another team and only hang around for a season, if that. And I'm wondering if Belichick is kind of a similar thing, you know, kind of like how Joe Namath went to the Rams or Johnny Unitas went to the Chargers.
Yeah, but those guys are at the end of their career. I think what you do is you go back and look at New England. Veteran players, great veteran players you thought were, quote, hanging on, they want to win a ring.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, like Seau was another example of that, right?
Seau, Rodney Harrison, Randy Moss, Corey Dillon. They went to New England to be coached by that guy because that guy puts teams in the playoffs and gets them to the Super Bowl.
Well, not without Tom Brady.
Oh, that's true. Next question.
Okay, let's go here to Gary. He says, nobody wants to work for Spanos. Eli was right.
It's interesting that Gary brings that angle to the conversation. I thought about this morning. I don't know anybody who has left the Charger organization that feels good about having to leave. Everybody was peeved. General managers, coaches, players, employees, just broadcasters. Every relationship that they touch ends up really bad by the time you get to the finish line. Is that them? Is it the culture of Team Spanos, first family of football in last place? Or is it just the nature of the NFL that everybody gets to the end of the road somewhere?
Well, I remember when that all went down and San Diego fans are like appalled. Like, how could anyone say they don't want to play for the San Diego Chargers? And now we look back on it, it's like, yeah, they were right. You know, I mean, Eli went and won 2 Super Bowls, and Phillip Rivers never lived up to the potential, largely because the supporting cast around him wasn't good enough.
Well, Rivers, Gates, Tomlinson might be the exception to my statement, but that's because Father Time's clock ran out on those superstar players. But organizationally, just never able to put good people around them. And the good people they had leading them, they all got fired. Fired the Hall of Fame general manager, fired a Hall of Fame coach. They fired a Super Bowl coach. They fired a 200-win head coach. First family football.
Right. They fired the Hall of Fame announcer. Unbelievable.
Damn right they did.
Yeah.
Okay, move on.
Moving on. Let's go to 4RXLA. MLB needs to do something about these mega million deferred contracts the Dodgers are giving. What happens when the deferred payments are due?
Well, the total revenue in baseball, like the NFL, like the NBA, like NHL, goes up every year. You will have expiring contracts. So when the deferred payments come up in 2036 for Ohtani, or these other guys, Yamamoto, etc., all these other contracts will be off the books. Now, I don't think we're ever going to have a salary cap in Major League Baseball, but the luxury tax will stay in place. So there's great revenue there. And keep in mind the international amount of revenue the Dodgers will pull in from Japan Airlines and all the other corporate sponsors with Pacific Rim ties. It's going to be enormous. It's going to be like a $50 million boost in sponsorships. You go to Dodger Stadium, you tell me how many Pacific Rim companies will be advertising at Dodger Stadium this year because of Showtime and Yamamoto.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I expect when I watch a game behind home plate and when they have the ads there, we're going to see a lot of Japanese writing. It's definitely going to be a culture shift there. That's exciting, I think, for Major League Baseball and this internationalization of the sport. But, you know, are they going to make these payments? You know, that's one of the things you wonder about is $68 million just to one guy, you know, passing out. The Dodgers are probably going to have no problem with it.
But that's over a 10-year window, so it's only $6 million a year.
Okay.
You know, that's a utility man on a roster. That'll be fascinating. I think the bigger issue, and this will be another argument for another time, the bigger issue is it good for baseball that if we have 7 marquee teams and 25 other cities that just have teams that can't compete with the 7 marquee.
That sounds like the NBA, right? And the NBA is pretty successful. Now, granted, NFL's got that, you know, revenue sharing model But I don't see Major League Baseball going that way at all.
Okay, we move on.
Okay, we got another, actually a great baseball question here. This is from Ben. He says, any insight on Mark Sweeney being let go?
Well, I've been told that this has all got to do with the Bally bankruptcy and the TV deal, that Mark Sweeney is not coming back. I've been told that Annie Heilbrunn is not coming back. They're all victims of budget cuts because MLB has now taken over the broadcast. I don't know what Mike Pomerantz's status is as of now, but we're 30 days away from spring training, so we'll get to find out. They didn't do anything wrong. They did good content. I thought the Padre TV package was cool. I thought it was diverse. It was dynamic. I like all those people. But at the end of the day, when MLB had to take it over because of the Bally bankruptcy, they looked at the volume of money spent and said, okay, we'll get the Padres through 2023, but in 2024, the structure is going to change of how we're going to operate. And they're reducing the number of employees that are part of the game day broadcast. But they didn't do anything wrong at all. They did good TV, but they got caught up in the bankruptcy. And it's happening other places. I think there's at least 11 more baseball teams that have an uncertain TV contract situation that's still got to be resolved as to whether MLB is going to take over the streaming service and just run the thing like they did last year with the Padres. I thought Major League Baseball did a phenomenal job, but they knew going in that there was a lot of trouble with Diamond Sports and Bally Sports in terms of probable bankruptcy. And they had put their foundation in place. They hired 3 Fox executives to operate what would be MLB streaming. And then the Padres were the first one in. And, you got Arizona, you got Texas, you got the Pirates, you got the Reds, you got the Indians or the Guardians. There's a whole bunch of them out there that still have issues. But baseball, they did a phenomenal job in about a 3-month window that this might happen to put that thing in. Because outside of the channel change, you didn't notice anything different about Padre baseball. It was still what they had been in the past in terms of serving the fans. They did a great job.
Well, the game was the same, but I liked that pregame show that they had, and in their postgame show, I thought Pomerantz and Sweeney did a good job. And remember a number of years back, they had the Padres social hour, where they would kind of hang out near the gift shop and they'd bring guys in, sit on the couch and talk. That was kind of fun too. But then I'll remember all of a sudden, there's no pregame, and it felt a little weird at first. But Sweeney is an interesting character because he has great insight of the game. Obviously, a former player, has had success, but there's a lot of fans that just don't like him. They didn't like his commentary. Sometimes I wonder if people are just so in love with Mark Grant that when Sweeney was doing the color on occasion, he just never lived up to Mark Grant. He was different, and then I think the fans bagged on him.
Well, I think you can have point counterpoint. I don't want cheerleaders every minute of every day. I want somebody that's going to raise questions about why this situation exists the way this situation exists and express an opinion. And I tend to think they do. I thought Sweeney did a great job of pointing out this problem with that team or that player. Not to be critical, he was a player. He hit 212. He also hit 282.
Yeah.
So now I think the total broadcast was really good. And I'm sad to see anybody get laid off, as witnessed by what I went through right around Christmas week.
Really?
So that's where we are. We'll see what happens with the Padres, but I think, there's 2 probably won't be part of it. Maybe there's a 3rd one too.
Well, let's see. We got another Dodger comment here. This is from Dave EK. And by the way, Tim Todd wants more Dodger discussion. So Dave says, Bellinger won't get $200 million because he's a mammoth pothead. It's obvious in his Dodger years. He can be good if he's straight.
Well, they fixed him at Wrigley Field. I mean, he did have a big bounce back season. What did he hit? 306, 27 home runs. Because those 2 prior years, that was misery. Now, Scott Boras, the agent, said, well, that's got to do with the shoulder and maybe it wasn't rehabbed correctly. Hard to say what's fact, what's fiction. At the end of the day, that was a lot of money to pay a guy hitting 197 or 206. That's why the Dodgers let him go. And a lot of other people say, okay, which is the real Cody Bellinger? What we saw early on with the Dodgers, the MVP season, what we saw last year at Wrigley Field, or the bunch of junk in between. So price tag's probably coming down on him. I am surprised. I hear Toronto is back in the conversation, which surprises me because I think the Blue Jays need pitching. They don't need another bat. Although Matt Chapman obviously is not going to be re-signed. So Bellinger will sign. The thing is, just like Blake Snell and these other guys, what's the term, years, and what's the dollar value?
Well, it's interesting with Bellinger because we always kind of focus on the ups and downs with his bat. But the dude defensively, center fielder, he's actually very good.
Yep.
And I always forget that. I mean, because I first thought of him mostly as a first baseman. But yeah, there'd be video shots in the dugout of Bellinger, and the dude had glassy eyes, and you were kind of wondering what was going on. But if he's got his life straightened out and he's working out and he's focused on playing ball, yeah, he may be worth it.
Let's get a couple more in here.
Okay, let's get some social media comments here, and let's go here about a little Jim Harbaugh discussion. This is from G Green and says, "Yeah, man, hire Harbaugh. 3-6 against his rival, 2-7 in bowl games, lost 27 games in 9 seasons at Michigan, didn't do squat at Stanford, created the misfit Kaepernick, has been suspended twice for lying and cheating. Yep, great hire, LOL. Empty the bank for him."
GG Renee standing on the sidelines. Oh, he's over there on the street corner by himself. That's the only negative that I've heard about Jim Harbaugh. I'll throw this at you. He has had enormous success. However, he wears people out. And his relationships, by the time he gets to the finish line, aren't real good. I know about USD, and I know about Stanford, the finish line, and I know about the end in San Francisco. And we're looking at a bit of a story here in Ann Arbor that nobody's talking about. That's the posse. That's the sheriff at the front door in Ann Arbor. That's NCAA violations are investigating COVID recruiting. And I know what they just did to the University of Tennessee for the exact same stuff. I got to believe Michigan's going to get tagged here for COVID violation. Now, whether Harbaugh knew, that's another question. Nobody quite can understand how junk can go on in that football program, and him being a control freak, not having any knowledge of it. But, I mean, the record is the record. And by the way, look what he put together in Ann Arbor, and look what they did with that game last night.
Well, I don't think any NFL teams are worried about the, alleged cheating at Michigan with Harbaugh. They just want a winner. But I'm surprised that Harbaugh survived the season because he was suspended twice. Mm-hmm. So, I'm amazed that he was able to coach there for the championship game. But, if the Chargers sign Harbaugh, it's going to fail. Something is going to go wrong because of the Chargers track record.
You just can't give up the word chargering, can you?
No, not at all. I mean, I just kind of root for them to kind of choke. It's funny that way. All right, here, let's go to Mando. He says, Riley and Kiffin and other coaches have no right to say anything about players leaving or sitting out bowl games, seeing as they have done the same thing, leaving at season's end and leaving their kids hanging. The vast majority of players go to these universities to play for the coaches, not for some sense of loyalty for the school. Then the coach bails because they got a new gig and leaves them high and dry. And now these kids are doing this. They complain.
Well, I think there's utter chaos, and I think it's been destructive to football. And I do think we're doing this podcast 1 year from tonight. I think the transfer portal will be different. I think the NIL will be different. I think the NCAA is going to get an antitrust exemption from Congress that will help them take total control. Players have a right to obtain money. Players probably have a right to transfer, but the calendar has to be changed. These kids should not be opting out of bowl games because they're waiting to get an offer in the transfer portal. You ruin the bowl games. You're destructive to the bowls. And these are supposed to be special events for the community as well as for the football programs. The thing is totally out of control. It'll be brought, I really believe it's going to be, Sandro, I think it's going to be reeled back in by the NCAA within 1 calendar year.
Well, I think Mando brings up a good point because there's hypocrisy, because Riley left Oklahoma right after the regular season, and they had to bring in Stoops to manage or coach the bowl game a few years ago. So that ain't right either. So, yeah, I think the whole NCAA needs to get their house in order.
John Riley's found Christianity while doing this podcast with me. The stuff that comes out of his mouth, right versus wrong. Let's do another one here.
All right, let's go here to a little Padre comment. And this is about the Wusuk Go. And he says, what credit is there to give A.J. Preller? He's leaving us in a big hole with no center field or left field.
Yeah, please don't give me a starting opening day lineup with Profar and Azukar in your outfield slots. But he went out and he got people he could afford. And I think that's the big issue. And he got 2 really good players from Japan. And he's got pipelines there. He knows he scouts there. And You've heard me use the phrase boots on the ground. That's all part of Padre baseball, scouting everywhere to find guys. And he convinced these guys to come here at a little bit different price tag. They got very affordable pitchers. And I got to believe these guys can pitch at this level, which will help you. And I'm not saying that we're biding time till the next wave of kids get here, but we're probably biding time till Rob Snelling is ready to come to Major League Baseball. Maybe that's half a season. Maybe that's the start of next year. Add into the equation, granted they got holes at left and center, add into the equation, I got to believe these veteran players who collectively hit like 130 points below their career averages. Mm-hmm. I got to believe these guys are going to hit back. These guys will be better this coming season. And by the way, you got a new manager. And I think this manager is going to be given some free room to lean on that guy that we're going to do it this way. And it's not going to be a country club anymore. I don't care who you are. And I don't care how much money you're making. There's a rough edge to Mike Schilt that I think these players are going to find out about pretty soon. So I'm hoping there's a bounce back from the everyday players. And I think the two Japanese guys will be quality acquisitions. They're still wafer thin. Injuries are part of the equation. We'll talk more about this, within 30 days when we go to the Cactus League. But AJ got two pitchers, so he's still got two slots to fill. I don't know how he's going to fill them.
Well, I think
Don't
my
feel
mind.
bad. I get brain locked too.
Sometimes. Well, I want to talk about one thing here with Schilt, and you were saying, he could be a tough guy, but did you see him? He was in the Dominican Republic at the Winter Games there, and then Tatis, to support Tatis, and now the Padres let Tatis play through the playoffs there. I think that's a good move, trying to build relationships. And imagine if Tatis comes back to what he was, we may not miss Juan Soto too much.
Imagine if Tatis runs into a wall or steps in a hole in the Dominican playoffs, meaningless playoff games. What would you say then?
Oh, yeah, or gets on a motorcycle. But I think some of these other guys like Jackson Merrill, some of the young kids, I think we might see them maybe make the Major League roster.
A little bit sooner than later. Merrill probably sooner. Snelling, no. Snelling and Lasco, who are the top two young pitchers, they've got to do it at AA and maybe even get a taste of AAA. Hey, listen, we hope you have enjoyed our Tuesday bonus podcast.